The Viscount mocked her scarred face at the masquerade, until she removed her mask, and he recognized his childhood love. The October wind carried the salt spray from Long Island Sound as Eleanor Hart stepped out of the hired car, her gloved hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her mask. The Ashford estate rose before her like something from another century, all Gothic revival spires and mullioned windows glowing gold against the darkening Connecticut sky. She'd spent 3 hours perfecting her disguise, an elaborate Venetian half-mask, adorned with black feathers and jet beads, covering the right side of her face entirely. The left side she'd painted with theatrical makeup, creating the illusion of symmetry where none existed. She shouldn't have come, 6 years away from this world, from these people, and here she was, walking back into the gilded cage she'd fought so hard to escape. But her sister Grace had begged, and Eleanor had never been able to deny Grace anything, not when they were children sharing secrets in their grandmother's rose garden, and not now, when Grace needed her to attend this absurd masquerade ball to secure a business partnership that could save their family's struggling vineyard. Miss Hart. A valet approached, his expression professionally neutral. "Your invitation?" Eleanor produced the embossed card from her beaded clutch. The valet's eyes flickered with recognition, not of her face, mercifully hidden, but of the name. Everyone in this insular world of Connecticut old money knew the Harts. Once they'd been among the elite, before the accident, before Eleanor's face had become a topic of whispered conversation and pitying glances. Inside, the ballroom was a fever dream of excess. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across dancers swirling in period costumes. Marie Antoinette dancing with Napoleon, Cleopatra laughing at something a Renaissance pope was saying. The Ashfords had demanded full commitment to the theme, nobility through the ages. Eleanor recognized the music, a string quartet playing Strauss, live and achingly beautiful. Before I continue with Eleanor's story, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Your support means everything, and I love hearing from viewers all around the world. Now, let's return to the masquerade, where Eleanor is about to face her past in the most unexpected way. She accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server and positioned herself near a marble pillar, observing. She'd promised Grace 2 hours, enough time to make an appearance, to remind the Ashfords and their circle that the Harts weren't completely vanquished. Enough time to show that Eleanor Hart, despite everything, could still hold her head high among these people. "Still hiding in corners, I see." The voice cut through her like a blade dipped in honey, smooth, aristocratic, and achingly familiar. Eleanor's breath caught as she turned to face the man behind her. He wore the costume of an English viscount, complete with a tailcoat, brocade waistcoat, and a simple black domino mask that did nothing to hide his identity. Alexander Ashford. Of course it was Alexander. This was his family's estate, his party, his world, and she had once loved him with the desperate, all-consuming passion that only exists at 17. "Lord Ashford," she said, keeping her voice steady, modulated. She'd practiced this, prepared for the possibility of seeing him. "I didn't realize wallflowers offended you so deeply." "They don't." He stepped closer and she caught his scent, sandalwood and something crisp like winter air. "But beautiful women hiding their light does. Your mask is exquisite. May I know who I'm addressing?" He didn't recognize her. The realization was both a relief and a peculiar kind of pain. She'd changed, of course. 6 years and a traumatic injury would do that. But they'd known each other since childhood, had spent countless summers running through each other's estates, building forts in the woods, sharing confidences under star-filled skies. "Just another party guest," Eleanor said lightly, enjoying the spectacle. The spectacle! Alexander's mouth, the only part of his face she could fully see, curved into a sardonic smile. Is that what we're calling it? I'd have gone with desperate peacocking by the desperately wealthy. Careful, Eleanor warned, unable to suppress a smile of her own. That sounds dangerously like self-awareness. He laughed, genuinely surprised. Touché. Most people here are too busy networking or gossiping to actually speak their minds. He studied her, his gaze intense even behind the mask. You're not from the usual crowd, are you? You carry yourself differently. Perhaps I'm just better at pretending. Or perhaps you've seen enough of this world to know it's mostly theatre. He gestured to the ballroom. Look at them. The Whitneys are bankrupt, but won't admit it. Senator Caldwell's daughter just entered rehab for the 3rd time. The Vanderhavens are about to announce their divorce after 30 years, and everyone here knows it except them. We're all just playing dress-up, pretending our bloodlines and bank accounts make us special. Eleanor blinked, taken aback by his bitter honesty. This wasn't the Alexander she remembered, the golden boy who'd seemed to glide through life with effortless charm, who'd never questioned his place in this world. Something had changed him, hardened him. That's rather bleak for a masquerade ball, she said softly. Is it? He moved even closer, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the weariness there. I think masks are the perfect metaphor. We're all pretending to be something we're not, hiding what's real, showing the world what we think they want to see. Before Eleanor could respond, a woman's shrill voice cut through the music. Alexander, there you are! A blonde in an elaborate Marie Antoinette costume descended on them, her smile sharp and proprietary. She looped her arm through Alexander's with the confidence of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. You promised me the next dance. Did I? The Alexander's tone was polite but cool. I don't recall. Of course you did, darling. The woman, Victoria Pennington, Eleanor recognized now, shipping heiress and social climber extraordinaire, turned to Eleanor with a dismissive glance. I'm sure your friend here won't mind. Eleanor saw the tension in Alexander's jaw, the way his eyes tightened with frustration. She should let him go, should fade back into the shadows. Instead, she found herself saying, Actually, I believe Lord Ashford promised me this dance first. Victoria's expression could have curdled milk. I don't believe we've met. We haven't. Eleanor met her gaze steadily. I would have remembered. Alexander's surprise was palpable, but he recovered quickly, offering Eleanor his arm with a slight bow. The lady is quite right. If you'll excuse us, Victoria. As they moved to the dance floor, Alexander whispered, That was either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Victoria Pennington isn't someone you want as an enemy. Maybe I'm not planning to be around long enough for it to matter. The music shifted to a waltz, and Alexander pulled her into the dance with practiced ease. His hand at her waist was warm even through the fabric of her gown, and Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be this close to him, forgotten the way her body seemed to recognize his on some cellular level. You're full of surprises, Alexander said as they turned across the floor. First you see through the performance of it all, then you stand up to Victoria Pennington, and now you waltz like you've been doing it your whole life. Haven't we all? Eleanor kept her eyes on his chest, not trusting herself to meet his gaze. Those summer cotillions your mother used to host were nothing if not educational. She felt him stiffen, his steps faltering for just a moment. You knew my mother. Eleanor cursed herself silently. She'd said too much, let nostalgia loosen her tongue. I meant the Ashfords in general. Everyone knows about the legendary Ashford summer parties. Used to host, Alexander repeated slowly, and something in his voice made Eleanor look up despite herself. Behind his mask, his eyes were searching, intense. You said used to. Those parties ended 6 years ago. I've heard stories. From whom? He was piecing it together now. She could see it happening behind his eyes. Who are you? The music was ending. Eleanor could feel the weight of eyes on them, Victoria Pennington's poisonous glare, curious stares from others who'd noticed Alexander dancing with a stranger. She needed to leave, needed to get away before he figured it out, before she shattered this strange, painful, perfect moment. "Someone who understands about masks," she said quietly. "Thank you for the dance, Lord Ashford." She pulled away, but his hand caught hers, gentle but firm. "Wait. At least tell me your name. Does it matter? You said it yourself. We're all just pretending. It matters to me." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her. Eleanor gently extracted her hand, took a step back. "Perhaps we'll meet again. Perhaps not. Isn't that the magic of a masquerade? The mystery?" She disappeared into the crowd before he could protest, her heart pounding, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. She'd been foolish to come, foolish to think she could face him without feeling everything she'd spent 6 years trying to forget. Eleanor made her way through the press of bodies, searching for an exit, any exit. The ballroom suddenly felt suffocating, the laughter too loud, the lights too bright. She found a door leading to a terrace and slipped through it, gasping in the cold October air. "Leaving so soon?" Eleanor spun to find a woman leaning against the balustrade, smoking a cigarette with elegant disdain. She wore a Cleopatra costume and a knowing smile. "Let me guess. You danced with Alexander Ashford and now you're running away." "I'm just getting some air." "Sure you are." The woman stubbed out her cigarette. "I'm Margaret Chen, by the way, Alex's cousin. And before you bolt completely, you should know he hasn't looked that alive in years. Whatever you said to him in there, it mattered. I'm nobody, just a guest." Margaret laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Honey, nobody at an Ashford party is nobody. We're all somebody, usually somebody damaged or desperate or both." She studied Eleanor with sharp, intelligent eyes. "That's a hell of a mask you're wearing. Custom made." Eleanor's hand instinctively went to her face. "Something like that. Hides a lot, I bet. But here's the thing about masks. They only work if nobody knows what you're hiding." Margaret pushed off the balustrade, starting toward the door. "Alexander's been dying by inches in there for 6 years, ever since Eleanor Hart left and broke his heart." Eleanor's breath stopped. Margaret paused in the doorway, glancing back with a sad smile. "The accident was terrible, everyone knows that. But you know what was worse? Losing you. He never got over it. Still hasn't." She disappeared back into the party, leaving Eleanor alone with the sound of the waves and the weight of 6 years of regret. Eleanor didn't return to the ballroom. She found Grace in a side parlour, negotiating with Thomas Ashford, Alexander's father, over vineyard contracts and distribution rights. Grace shot her a questioning look, but Eleanor just shook her head minutely. Later. They would talk later. She slipped away to the mansion's library, a cavernous room lined with books that probably hadn't been read in decades. The masquerade continued below, muffled music and laughter drifting up through the floors. Eleanor sank into a leather chair, finally allowing herself to remove her mask. The face in the mirror across the room was familiar now, after 6 years. The scars ran from her temple down to her jaw on the right side, a web of silver-white tissue where the car's windshield had shattered into her skin. The surgeons had done their best, but some damage couldn't be undone. She'd learned to live with it, had even learned to find a strange kind of power in it. Her scars were proof she'd survived. But facing Alexander, dancing with him, feeling his eyes on her masked face, it had torn open old wounds that had nothing to do with her accident. She'd been 17 when it happened, driving home from a party on a rainy October night, almost exactly 6 years ago. Alexander had been at college, his first semester at Yale. They'd been planning his fall break visit, making elaborate plans to explore Newport together, to finally tell their families that they were more than childhood friends. The accident had changed everything. 3 months in the hospital, countless surgeries, And when Eleanor had finally been well enough to see visitors, she'd sent word that she didn't want Alexander to come. Couldn't bear for him to see her like that. Broken, scarred, no longer the girl he'd known. He tried anyway, showed up at her hospital room with flowers and desperate eyes. Eleanor had turned her face away, had told him to leave, had said terrible things designed to drive him away for good. It had worked. He'd left, and she'd spent the next 6 years building a new life in Boston, working for a non-profit, living in a modest apartment, avoiding society events and anyone who might recognize her. Until Grace had called, desperate, explaining that their family vineyard was failing, that their parents were too proud to ask for help but would lose everything without it, that the Ashfords were looking for a New England vineyard to partner with, and this could save them. All Eleanor had to do was attend the masquerade, remind the Ashfords that the Harts were still a family worth investing in. "I thought I might find you here." Eleanor's head snapped up. Alexander stood in the library doorway, his mask removed, his expression unreadable. She reached for her mask, but he was already crossing the room. "Don't," he said softly. "Please don't." He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see every detail of his face, the face that had haunted her dreams for 6 years. He looked older. There were lines of stress around his mouth, shadows under his eyes. But he was still beautiful, in that way that had nothing to do with symmetry and everything to do with soul. Eleanor. Her name on his lips was a prayer, a question, an accusation all at once. "How did you know?" "Your voice, the way you move, the fact that you remembered my mother's parties." He laughed, but there was no humor in it, and Margaret told me I was an idiot if I couldn't see it. Margaret talks too much. Margaret's usually right. He moved closer, and Eleanor's instinct was to turn away, to hide her scarred side. But something in his eyes stopped her. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" "Because this." She gestured at her face, at the scars she'd spent so long learning to accept. "This isn't who I was. And I didn't know if I could bear to see you look at me and see this. Look at you and see what?" His voice was rough with emotion. "See the girl I loved. See the woman who disappeared from my life without explanation. See someone so brave she walked into a room full of people who'd judge her and danced with me anyway. You don't understand. No, you don't understand." Alexander closed the remaining distance between them, his hands gentle as they framed her face, his thumbs tracing the edges of her scars with infinite tenderness. "You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. These scars, they're part of your story. They're proof you survived, and I've spent 6 years thinking I'd driven you away, that something I'd done or said had made you cut me out of your life." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks. "I was trying to protect you. You had this perfect future ahead of you. Yale, law school, taking over the family business. I didn't want to be the scarred girlfriend people pitied. I didn't want you to stay with me out of obligation. So you decided for both of us." There was hurt in his voice, but also understanding. "You pushed me away to save me from having to choose. But Eleanor, don't you see? I'd already chosen. I chose you the summer I was 15 and you beat me at chess for the first time. I chose you every day after that." Alexander. She didn't know what to say, how to explain 6 years of fear and self-loathing and stubborn pride. "I looked for you," he said quietly, "for months after the accident. Your parents said you'd asked for space, that you'd gone to Boston for treatment. I respected that, thought you needed time. But when I tried to reach out later, you never responded. Eventually, I got the message. You didn't want me in your life." "I wanted you too much," Eleanor whispered. "That was the problem. I wanted you so badly that it hurt, and I couldn't bear the thought of you staying with me out of pity or duty. I needed you to be free. Free. Alexander's laugh was bitter. You want to know what I've been free to do? Watch my father drink himself into oblivion because he can't accept that the family business is failing. Watch my mother pretend everything's fine while they mortgage the estate piece by piece. Date women like Victoria, who see me as a stepping stone to social status. Become exactly what I never wanted to be, one more hollow aristocrat playing at nobility while the world crumbles around me. Eleanor reached up, covering his hands with hers. What happened? 6 years ago you had everything. Your family was solid, the business was thriving. My mother got sick. The words were simple, but the pain behind them was infinite. Cancer. By the time they caught it, it was too late. She died 3 years ago, and my father hasn't been the same since. The business started failing because he couldn't focus, couldn't make decisions. We've been hemorrhaging money trying to keep up appearances. God, Alexander, I'm so sorry. Don't be, or rather don't just be sorry for me. Be sorry that we lost 6 years. Be sorry that you pushed me away when we could have been facing life's disasters together. His eyes searched hers. Because that's what people who love each other do, Eleanor. They don't protect each other from pain. They face it together. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and regret. Eleanor's mind raced with everything she wanted to say, everything she'd held back for so long. I didn't know about your mother, she said finally. I'm so sorry. I should have been there. And I should have been there for you. After the accident, during recovery, when you needed support. Alexander's hands were still cradling her face, his touch achingly familiar. We both made mistakes. We both pushed each other away, thinking we were doing the right thing. Where does that leave us now? I don't know. He rested his forehead against hers, and Eleanor closed her eyes, breathing him in. But I know I don't want to waste another 6 years. I know that seeing you tonight, even before I knew it was you, made me feel alive for the first time in forever. A knock at the library door interrupted them. Grace stood there, her expression apologetic but urgent. Eleanor, I'm sorry, but we need to go. Dad just called. There's a problem at the vineyard. Eleanor reluctantly stepped back from Alexander, already missing the warmth of his touch. What kind of problem? The kind that involves the bank and foreclosure notices. Grace's voice was tight with stress. We need to get home, now. Alexander's hand caught Eleanor's as she turned to leave. How bad is it? Bad enough. Grace looked between them, her eyes widening as she registered what she was seeing, her sister, unmasked, with Alexander Ashford. Oh, I'll explain later, Eleanor promised. We need to go. Wait. Alexander released her hand, but his eyes held hers. Give me your number, a way to reach you, please. I just got you back. I'm not losing you again. Eleanor hesitated for just a moment, then pulled a business card from her clutch. I work for a non-profit in Boston. That's my cell number. Alexander tucked the card into his jacket like it was something precious. I'll call you. Tomorrow. And Eleanor, we're not done. Not by a long shot. As Eleanor and Grace hurried out of the Ashford estate, Eleanor felt Alexander's eyes on her until they disappeared around a corner. The October wind had picked up, carrying the scent of salt water and dying leaves. Everything had changed in the space of a few hours, and Eleanor wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. In the car, Grace immediately turned to her. Want to tell me what that was about? You and Alexander Ashford, looking at each other like we used to, like we never stopped? Eleanor's laugh was shaky. I don't know what I'm doing, Grace. I came here to help you with the vineyard, not to resurrect a relationship that died 6 years ago. Died? Grace's voice was gentle. Ellie, some things don't die. They just go dormant, waiting for the right conditions to bloom again. Eleanor stared out at the passing landscape, the fall colors muted in the darkness, the lights of distant houses like stars fallen to earth. I'm scared, she admitted. What if I let him back in and he realizes I'm not the girl he remembers? What if the reality can't live up to the memory? What if it's even better? Grace countered. You're not that 17-year-old girl anymore. You're stronger, braver, more yourself. Maybe that's what he needs. Maybe that's what you both need. They drove in silence for a while, each lost in thought. When Grace's phone rang, her expression grew grim as she listened. Okay, yes, we'll be there in 40 minutes. How bad? Eleanor asked. They're threatening to foreclose within 30 days if we can't make the back payments. Grace's hands tightened on the steering wheel. It's not just the vineyard, Ellie, it's the house. The land that's been in our family for 4 generations. Everything. Eleanor thought about her modest savings, the apartment in Boston she could sell, the non-profit job that paid well, but not vineyard saving well. And she thought about Alexander's words, about facing disasters together rather than apart. We'll figure it out, she said with more confidence than she felt. We always do. But as Connecticut's back roads gave way to the familiar landscape of their childhood home in the Berkshires, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For better or worse, she couldn't say. She'd come to the masquerade thinking she could observe from the shadows, could help her family without truly engaging with her past. Instead, she'd danced with the man she'd never stopped loving, revealed herself in every way that mattered, and now faced the possibility that they might lose everything that defined the Hart family legacy. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I meant what I said, we're not done. Whatever you're facing, you don't have to face it alone. Hey. Eleanor read the message 3 times, her heart doing complicated acrobatics in her chest. Grace glanced over, saw her expression, and smiled despite everything. So, Grace said, tell me everything about Alexander Ashford, and I mean everything. As they drove through the night toward home and crisis and uncertain futures, Eleanor found herself telling her sister about the boy she'd loved at 17 and the man he'd become, about scars visible and invisible, about masks worn and removed, about the strange mercy of second chances. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in 6 years, she felt like maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning. Eleanor barely slept that night. The Hart family home, a sprawling farmhouse built in 1847, was in worse condition than she'd realized. Paint peeling from the shutters, the front porch sagging, gardens that had once been her mother's pride, now overgrown with weeds. Inside, her parents looked older, worn down by years of struggling to keep the vineyard profitable in an increasingly competitive market. Her father, Richard Hart, sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, bank statements, foreclosure notices, bills marked past due in angry red ink. Her mother, Catherine, made tea with shaking hands, trying to maintain the gracious hospitality that had been bred into her since childhood. We didn't want to tell you, girls, Richard said, his voice rough with emotion. Thought we could turn it around. Every season we told ourselves this would be the year. This would be the vintage that made the difference. Why didn't you say something sooner? Grace asked, her tone more hurt than angry. Because you were building your own life in New York, Catherine said softly. And Eleanor was recovering, rebuilding. We didn't want to burden you with our problems. Eleanor thought about Alexander's words, about not protecting the people you loved from pain, about facing disasters together. The Hart family had been doing exactly what she'd done 6 years ago, trying to shield each other, ending up more isolated and broken as a result. Well, we know now, Eleanor said firmly, so let's figure out what we're actually dealing with. They spent hours going through the finances. The vineyard had been losing money for 3 years, ever since a late frost had destroyed most of their vines. They'd borrowed against the property to replant, but the new vines wouldn't be fully productive for another 2 years. Meanwhile, the bills kept coming, and the bank was done being patient. How much do you need to keep the bank at bay? Eleanor asked. Richard's laugh was hollow. 50,000 to catch up on back payments. Another 100,000 to have any hope of making it through the next 2 seasons. Grace and Eleanor exchanged glances. Their combined savings might cover the immediate debt, but it would leave them with nothing for emergencies, nothing for the long-term survival of the vineyard. What about the Ashford partnership? Eleanor asked. Did you and Thomas Ashford reach any agreement tonight? Grace nodded slowly. He's interested. Said he'd come tour the property next week, see the operation. If he likes what he sees, he's willing to invest, but he'd want partial ownership, at least 40%. That's a lot to give up, Catherine said, her voice breaking. It's better than losing everything, Richard countered. Maybe it's time to admit we can't do this alone. Eleanor's phone buzzed. Another text from Alexander. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about the library, about 6 years of not talking. Can we fix that? Coffee tomorrow? She typed back. I'm at my family's vineyard in the Berkshires, dealing with a crisis. His response was immediate. Address? I'll come to you. Eleanor's heart stuttered. You don't have to do that. I want to. Send me the address. Against her better judgment, Eleanor sent it. Then she looked up to find her entire family staring at her. What? She said defensively. That smile, Grace said, grinning, despite the circumstances. That's the smile you used to get when Alexander would text you in high school. I don't smile like anything. You absolutely do, her mother interrupted, and for the first time that night, there was warmth in her voice. I saw him at the masquerade, you know. Before you disappeared, you danced together. You recognized me. Sweetheart, I'm your mother. You could wear a dozen masks and I'd still know you. Catherine reached across the table, covering Eleanor's scarred hand with her own. Is that why you came home, Alexander? No, I came home for Grace, for the vineyard, for our family. Eleanor paused. But I saw him, yes. We talked. And now he wants to come here tomorrow. Richard leaned back in his chair, studying his daughter. The last time Alexander Ashford showed up at this house, you refused to see him, made us tell him to leave. Are you going to do that again? No. The word came out stronger than Eleanor expected. No, I'm not. I was wrong to push him away 6 years ago. I was wrong about a lot of things. Good, her father said simply, because that boy loved you with everything he had. And if memory serves, you loved him just as much. Don't let pride or fear rob you of that twice. They worked until nearly 3 in the morning, creating a financial plan that was optimistic at best, desperate at worst. Eleanor finally climbed the stairs to her childhood bedroom, unchanged since she'd left for college a decade ago, and collapsed on the bed without undressing. Sleep came in fits and starts, punctuated by dreams of Alexander's hands on her face, of dancing through an endless ballroom, of masks that wouldn't come off no matter how hard she pulled. She woke to autumn sunlight streaming through lace curtains and the smell of coffee drifting up from the kitchen. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from the non-profit where she worked, 7 emails, and 1 text from Alexander. On my way. Be there around noon. Eleanor showered, dressed in jeans and a soft sweater, armor of a different kind than the ball gown, and went downstairs to find her mother in the kitchen making enough food to feed an army. Mom, it's just Alexander coming, not the entire Ashford family. We don't know that. Catherine was in full hostess mode, a sign of stress Eleanor recognized. Thomas might come too if he's touring the vineyard. We need to be prepared. Or we could just be ourselves, Eleanor suggested gently. Maybe that's the whole point. No more pretending, no more performance. Her mother's hands stilled over the dough she'd been kneading. When did you get so wise? When I spent 6 years learning that hiding doesn't actually protect you from pain. It just makes you lonely. Catherine pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. I've missed you, Ellie. Not just your presence, but you, the real you, the girl who spoke her mind and challenged everything and loved with her whole heart. She got lost for a while, Eleanor admitted, but I think she might be finding her way back. At 11:47, a sleek black car pulled up the long drive to the Hart farmhouse. Eleanor watched from the porch as Alexander climbed out, wearing dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look even more blue. He looked tired, like maybe he hadn't slept either, but when he saw her, his face transformed with a smile that stole her breath. "Hey," he said, climbing the porch steps. "Hey." Eleanor resisted the urge to smooth her hair, to check her makeup. She'd deliberately kept it simple today, no heavy contouring to minimize her scars. This was who she was. Take it or leave it. Alexander took it. His eyes traced her face with something like reverence. "Thank you for letting me come. Thank you for wanting to." They stood there for a moment, two people who'd once known each other better than anyone, and were now almost strangers. Then Alexander closed the distance and pulled her into a hug, and Eleanor's careful composure shattered. She wrapped her arms around him and breathed him in, feeling 6 years of loneliness crack and split and fall away. "I missed you," he whispered into her hair. "God, Eleanor, I missed you so much." "I missed you too." The words came out broken, but honest, every single day. They pulled apart reluctantly, and Eleanor saw that Alexander's eyes were bright with unshed tears. He cleared his throat, trying for lightness. "So, your family needs help." "We need a miracle, but I'll settle for a good business plan and someone willing to invest." "I might be able to help with that." At Eleanor's questioning look, Alexander continued, "My father's interest in your vineyard isn't just business. He's been looking for a way to diversify, to rebuild the Ashford portfolio. Your family's land, your varietals, your reputation, even damaged. It's worth something. But more than that, he respects your father. Always has." "That respect might not survive seeing the state we're actually in," Eleanor warned. "It's bad, Alexander. Really bad." "Then let's make it better." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers with the ease of long practice. "Show me everything. The vineyard, the winery, the books. Whatever you're dealing with, we face it together. That's how this works now." Eleanor led him through the property, showing him the neat rows of vines, some established, some newly planted, all requiring constant care and attention. She showed him the winery building, where oak barrels held last year's vintage aging slowly, where stainless steel fermentation tanks gleamed in the dim light. Alexander asked intelligent questions, taking notes on his phone, occasionally stopping to examine something more closely. He wasn't just humoring her, Eleanor realized. He was genuinely interested, genuinely trying to help. "The bones are good," he said finally, as they stood in the vineyard, looking out over the rolling Berkshire hills. "The land is prime, the infrastructure needs work, but it's salvageable. What you need is capital and expertise." "We have expertise," Eleanor said, a little defensive. "My father's been making wine for 30 years. I know, but your father is one person. What if you had a team? What if the Ashford investment included not just money, but connections, distribution networks, marketing expertise, access to sommelier networks in New York and Boston? In exchange for what percentage?" Alexander met her eyes directly. "That's between your father and mine. But Eleanor, I want you to know, I came here today for you, to see you, to help you if I could. The business is secondary." "Is it?" Eleanor couldn't help the edge in her voice. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks awfully convenient. The girl you used to love needs help. And oh, coincidentally, your family business needs new investments. Forgive me if I'm a little skeptical about motivations." Alexander's expression hardened. "You think I'm using your family's crisis as a way to get close to you?" I think we haven't seen each other in 6 years, and suddenly you're ready to ride to the rescue like some kind of knight in shining armor. It's a lot, Alexander. You're right. He took a step back, giving her space. It is a lot, and maybe my timing is terrible. But here's the truth. I would have come if you'd called me 6 days ago, or 6 months ago, or 6 years ago. I would have dropped everything, because despite everything that happened, despite the silence and the hurt, you're still the person He broke off, shaking his head. You're still you, and I'm still me, and maybe that matters more than 6 years of mistakes. Eleanor felt her throat tighten with emotion. I don't want your pity, and I don't want you to stay, because you feel obligated to the memory of who we used to be. Is that what you think this is? Alexander's laugh was incredulous. Eleanor, I'm not here out of pity or obligation. I'm here because last night, dancing with you, even before I knew it was you, I felt something I haven't felt in years. Hope, connection, the sense that maybe life could be more than just going through the motions. Pretty speech, Eleanor said, but her tone had softened. Not a speech, the truth. Alexander moved closer again, his eyes searching hers. I understand if you need time. I understand if 6 years apart means we need to start over, get to know each other again. But don't push me away because you're scared. Don't make decisions for both of us. Not again. Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, but a voice called from the house. Eleanor, Alexander, come inside. Thomas Ashford just arrived. They exchanged glances, the intensity of the moment broken but not forgotten. Ready to face the parents? Alexander asked with a wry smile. Not even a little bit, Eleanor admitted, but I don't think we have a choice. Inside, the Hart kitchen had transformed into an impromptu business meeting. Thomas Ashford sat at the table with Richard, both men surrounded by spreadsheets and wine bottles, samples from past vintages. Catherine poured coffee with the grace of a woman born to hospitality, while Grace hovered nearby, her paralegal training evident in the way she organized documents. Thomas Ashford looked older than Eleanor remembered, his hair more grey than brown, lines of stress etched deep around his mouth. But his eyes were sharp, assessing, as he looked up at her and Alexander. Miss Hart, he said formally, it's been some time. Mr. Ashford. Eleanor shook his hand firmly, refusing to be intimidated despite her racing heart. Thank you for considering our family's situation. Your father and I have been discussing the possibilities. Thomas gestured to the papers spread across the table. Your vineyard has potential, but it needs significant investment. The question is whether that investment is sound business or sentimentality. With respect, sir, Eleanor said, surprised by her own boldness. It can be both. Good business doesn't exclude caring about the people and places involved. Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly. Alexander, your friend has opinions. She always did, Alexander said, a note of pride in his voice. It's one of the things that makes her remarkable. The stumble over his words wasn't lost on anyone. Grace hid a smile behind her coffee cup. Catherine's expression softened with understanding. Richard and Thomas exchanged a glance that said more than words could. Let's talk numbers, Thomas said, steering the conversation back to business. Your father has shown me your production history, your current debt load, and your projections for the next 5 years. It's ambitious, but achievable, with the right support. They spent 2 hours going through possibilities. Thomas proposed a 40% stake in exchange for an immediate capital infusion of $150,000, plus access to Ashford distribution networks and marketing resources. He'd send a team to assess the property, create a comprehensive business plan, and if everything checked out, they'd formalize the partnership within 30 days. It was more than Eleanor had dared hope for. But she saw the way her father's hands trembled slightly as he signed the preliminary agreement, saw her mother's tears of relief. This vineyard was more than business to them. It was heritage, identity, legacy. Giving up 40% felt like surrender, even if it meant survival. "There's one more thing," Thomas said as they wrapped up. "I'd like Alexander to oversee the partnership. He needs experience managing real investments, and this project has the advantage of being personal enough that he'll care about its success." Alexander looked startled. "Dad, I'm sure Eleanor's family would prefer someone with more experience." "We'd be honored," Richard interrupted, his eyes moving between Alexander and Eleanor with paternal understanding. "Your involvement would be welcome." And just like that, Eleanor's carefully separated worlds collided. Alexander would be part of her family's business, would be present at the vineyard regularly, would be impossible to avoid even if she wanted to, which she was beginning to realize she didn't want to. After the Ashfords left, Thomas heading back to Connecticut, Alexander promising to return in 3 days with the assessment team, the Hart family collapsed around the kitchen table in a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "We did it," Grace said, her voice wondering. "We actually did it. The vineyard is saved." "Not saved yet," Richard cautioned, "but we have a fighting chance." Catherine was looking at Eleanor with a mother's knowing eyes. "That boy is still in love with you." "Mom, don't mom me. I have eyes. The way he looks at you, the way you look at him, it's the same as it was 6 years ago. Maybe stronger." "6 years changes people," Eleanor said quietly. "We barely know each other anymore." "Then get to know each other again," her father suggested. "But this time without the fear, without the hiding. Be honest about who you are, what you want, what scares you. If what you had was real then, it can survive the truth now." Eleanor thought about masks and scars, about the cost of protection and the risk of vulnerability. She thought about Alexander's hands on her face, tracing her scars like they were precious. She thought about 6 years of loneliness and whether she was brave enough to risk her heart again. Her phone buzzed. "Alexander, thank you for today, for letting me in even a little, for giving me hope that maybe we're not too broken to fix." Eleanor typed, "Maybe broken things are stronger when they're put back together. Maybe the cracks are where the light gets in." His response, "Leonard Cohen? Always. Coffee tomorrow, or breakfast, or just time." Eleanor looked at her family, her father organizing papers, her mother sketching out plans for spring plantings, Grace researching wine marketing strategies on her laptop. They were fighting for their legacy, refusing to give up even when everything seemed impossible. Maybe it was time Eleanor did the same. "Breakfast," she typed. "There's a diner in town, Rosie's, 8 a.m. I'll be there." That night, Eleanor lay in her childhood bed, watching shadows dance across the ceiling, thinking about second chances and the strange mercy of time. 6 years ago, she'd pushed Alexander away to save him from her damage. Now, she was beginning to understand that he'd never needed saving, just the chance to choose for himself. Tomorrow, she'd let him choose. And maybe, if she was brave enough, she'd choose too. Rosie's Diner was a Berkshire institution. Chrome and red vinyl booths, a jukebox in the corner playing Patsy Cline, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. Eleanor arrived 10 minutes early, her stomach a tangle of nerves and anticipation. She'd dressed carefully in dark jeans and a cream sweater, her hair pulled back to fully expose her scars. No masks today, no hiding. Alexander arrived exactly at 8, looking unfairly good in a navy Henley and worn jeans. He slid into the booth across from her, his smile tentative but warm. "Hi," he said. "Hi." They ordered. Pancakes for her, eggs and bacon for him, endless refills of coffee for both. For a few minutes they existed in the comfortable silence of two people who'd once known each other's rhythms. Then Alexander spoke. "I want to start over," he said. "Not forget the past, but not let it define everything either. So here's my truth. My name is Alexander James Ashford. I'm 30 years old. I run my family's investment firm. I'm terrible at cooking but excellent at ordering takeout. And 6 years ago, I lost the girl I loved and never quite recovered." Eleanor's heart hammered, but she followed his lead. Eleanor Margaret Hart, 30 years old. I work for a non-profit helping trauma survivors in Boston. I learned to love my scars because they remind me I survived. And 6 years ago, I pushed away the boy I loved because I was too afraid to let him choose me. "Why were you afraid?" Alexander's voice was gentle, curious, not accusing. Eleanor considered her answer carefully. "Because I'd built my entire identity around being pretty, around being the kind of girl who fit into your world. After the accident, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. The scars were the visible damage, but the real wound was deeper. I'd based my self-worth on something that could be taken away in a moment. And now? Now I know I'm more than my face, more than what other people see when they look at me. I'm strong and capable and worthy of love, scars and all." Eleanor met his eyes. "But it took 6 years, and a lot of therapy to get there. 6 years I could have spent with you, if I hadn't been so convinced you couldn't possibly want me anymore." Alexander reached across the table, taking her hand. "I want to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. The accident changed you, yes, but not in the way you think. You were always beautiful, Eleanor, but you were also sometimes shallow, sometimes mean to people you thought were beneath you, sometimes cruel in the way teenagers are when they're testing their power." Eleanor flinched, but he held her hand tighter, continued. "The woman you became after the accident, she's kinder, more empathetic, more real. Those scars, they didn't diminish you. They helped you become someone more authentically yourself. And that's the woman I fell for all over again at the masquerade, before I even knew it was you." Tears slipped down Eleanor's cheeks. "You're not supposed to say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it makes it harder to keep pushing me away." Alexander smiled, but his eyes were serious. "I'm done with games, Eleanor. I'm done with pretending and protecting and all the ways we hurt each other by trying not to hurt each other. I want you in my life. I want to rebuild what we had and see what we can become, but only if you want that too." "I do." The words came out choked but certain. "I want that. I'm terrified, but I want it." "Good." Alexander's thumb traced circles on her palm. "Then here's how this works. We take it slow. We date like actual adults, not nostalgic kids. We talk about the hard stuff, your fears, my baggage, the business partnership that's going to keep us in close proximity whether we like it or not. We're honest. We're patient. We see if who we are now can build something real." "What if we can't?" Eleanor had to ask. "What if too much time has passed?" "Then we'll have tried. We'll know." Alexander's expression was resolute. "But Eleanor, I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're going to discover that 6 years apart taught us how to be better together." The waitress appeared with their food, breaking the intensity of the moment. They ate and talked, and it was remarkably easy, falling back into the rhythm of conversation they'd perfected as teenagers, but with the depth that came from adult experience. Alexander told her about his mother's death, about holding her hand in hospice while she told him stories about falling in love with his father, about watching his dad crumble and not knowing how to help, about taking over the family business at 26, feeling desperately unprepared but having no choice. Eleanor told him about the year after the accident, about the depression that had swallowed her whole, about the therapist who'd finally helped her see that she was grieving not just her face, but her entire identity, about the non-profit work that had given her purpose, about learning that helping others heal helped her heal too. They talked until the diner filled with the lunch crowd, until Rosie herself came over and refilled their coffee cups for the 5th time with a knowing smile. "You two look like you got some things figured out," she said. "Working on it," Alexander said, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. Well, work faster. You're taking up my best booth. But she was laughing as she walked away. Outside, the October air was crisp and clean, the Berkshire Mountains a riot of fall colour. Alexander walked Eleanor to her car, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "Come to the vineyard tomorrow," Eleanor said impulsively. "Not for business, just to see it. I want to show you the place I grew up, the vines my grandfather planted, the reason all of this matters so much." "I'd like that." Alexander hesitated, then leaned in and pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle and sweet and full of promise. "Thank you for breakfast. Thank you for talking. Thank you for letting me back in." "Thank you for not giving up on me," Eleanor whispered. She watched him drive away, her heart full of possibilities she'd stopped believing in. Her phone rang. Grace, calling from New York. "Did you kiss him?" Grace demanded without preamble. "He kissed my forehead. That counts. How was it?" "Perfect. Terrifying. Like coming home and stepping off a cliff at the same time." Eleanor leaned against her car, smiling despite herself. "Grace, what if this is a mistake? What if we're trying to recapture something that can't exist anymore? Or," Grace countered, "what if you're building something even better? Stop overthinking. For once in your life, just feel." Eleanor spent the rest of the day helping her parents with vineyard maintenance, pruning vines, checking irrigation systems, doing the 100 small tasks that kept a winery running. Physical labor was good for settling her mind, for grounding her in the tangible reality of soil and vines and honest work. As the sun set over the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Eleanor's father found her in the vineyard, checking the newest vines. "These are going to be good," he said, examining the rootstock. "Another year, maybe 2, and they'll be producing quality fruit. If we make it that long, we will, thanks to your Alexander and his family." "He's not my Alexander," Eleanor protested weakly. Richard smiled. "Not yet, maybe, but he could be, if you let him." He put an arm around his daughter's shoulders. "I made a lot of mistakes with this vineyard, Ellie. Held on too tight. Refused to ask for help until it was almost too late. Don't make the same mistake with your heart." The next day, Alexander arrived at noon with a picnic basket and an easy smile. Eleanor showed him the vineyard properly this time, the different varietals her family grew, the microclimate variations across the property, the old cellar her great-grandfather had dug by hand. "This is what I've been protecting," Eleanor said, as they sat on a stone wall overlooking the vines. "Not just the land, but the story. 4 generations of hearts have worked this soil. Every vine represents someone's dream, someone's sacrifice." "I understand that," Alexander said quietly. "The Ashford estate has been in my family since 1892. Every room has a story, every piece of furniture a history. When my mother was dying, she made me promise not to let it go, not to let the legacy die with her." "Is that why you're working so hard? To keep that promise?" "Partly, but also because I don't know who I am without it." Alexander's voice was raw with honesty. "The Ashford name, the estate, the business, it's been my entire identity. Strip that away, and what's left?" Eleanor understood that fear intimately. "You're more than your name, Alexander, just like I'm more than my scars. We're both more than the things that define us to other people." "Then who are we?" "I don't know yet. Maybe that's what we figure out together." They spent the afternoon talking, walking the property, existing in that liminal space between past and future. When the sun began to set, Alexander pulled Eleanor close, and they watched the light change across the vineyard. "I have to go back to Connecticut tomorrow," he said. "Board meeting, business that can't wait, but I'll be back this weekend with the assessment team." "Okay. And Eleanor? I want you to come to the estate. There's something I need to show you. Something I should have shown you 6 years ago." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The Ashford assessment team arrived and spent 2 full days examining every aspect of the vineyard. Eleanor threw herself into proving the heart operation was worth saving, working alongside her parents to present their best face. But at night, she texted with Alexander. Long conversations about everything and nothing, about childhood memories and present fears, about dreams for the future. It felt like rebuilding a bridge, one plank at a time, testing each board to make sure it would hold their weight. On Friday, Eleanor drove to Connecticut. The Ashford estate looked different in daylight, less imposing, more beautiful. Alexander met her at the door, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "Come with me," he said, taking her hand. He led her through the mansion to a wing she'd never seen, to a locked door he opened with an old brass key. Inside was a studio, an artist's studio filled with paintings. "My mother's," Alexander explained. "She painted constantly when I was growing up. After she died, I couldn't bear to come in here, locked it up, pretended it didn't exist." Eleanor moved through the space, examining canvases. They were beautiful, landscapes mostly, but also portraits. And then she stopped, her heart in her throat. It was her. A painting of Eleanor at 17, laughing in summer sunlight, her hair loose and wild, her face unscarred and open. But it wasn't just her. There were dozens of sketches pinned to a board. Eleanor and Alexander as children. Eleanor reading under a tree. Eleanor dancing at a summer party. "She painted what she loved," Alexander said softly, "and she loved you. Used to tell me all the time that you were the best thing that ever happened to me." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face. "I didn't know. Neither did I. Not until after she died and I finally came in here." Alexander moved to stand beside her. "There's more." He showed her a portfolio, and inside were more recent sketches. Eleanor's hospital photo from the newspapers after the accident, studies of scars and healing, and then sketches of Eleanor imagined in the future, older, scarred, but still beautiful, still herself. "She was working on these when the cancer got too bad to hold a brush," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "She made me promise to find you, to tell you that scars were just stories written on skin, that you were still you, still worthy of love, still the girl who'd stolen my heart. Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't see me, wouldn't answer my calls or letters. And then time passed, and I convinced myself you'd moved on, that you were better off without me." Alexander turned Eleanor to face him. "But I never moved on. I've been stuck for 6 years, Eleanor. Stuck in this house full of ghosts, running a business I don't care about, dating women I don't love, waiting." "For what?" "For you to come back. For a second chance. For permission to stop pretending I'm okay when I'm not." Eleanor cupped his face in her hands. "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Not again." When they kissed, it was both familiar and new. The muscle memory of 17 mixed with the intention of 30. It was an apology and a promise, a question and an answer. They stayed in the studio for hours, Alexander telling her about his mother's final days, Eleanor sharing her own journey through darkness. They cried and laughed and held each other, 2 people finally brave enough to be vulnerable. "There's something else I need to tell you," Alexander said, as evening shadows filled the studio. "The Vineyard Partnership. My father approved it because I asked him to, because I told him saving your family's legacy was important to me, because even before I knew you'd be there at the masquerade, I was looking for ways to help you." Eleanor pulled back. "You manipulated the situation." "I created an opportunity. Your vineyard genuinely fits our investment strategy, Eleanor. But yes, I pushed for it. I'm not sorry. You should have told me. I'm telling you now, no more secrets, remember? That's the deal." Eleanor studied his face, seeing the determination there, the refusal to apologize for fighting for what he wanted. And she realized she didn't want him to apologize. She wanted someone who would fight for her, who would create opportunities, instead of waiting passively for fate to intervene. "Okay," she said, "but from now on, we're partners, in everything. No more making decisions for each other." "Partners," Alexander agreed, "in everything." The Ashford investment was finalized 3 weeks later. The capital infusion allowed the Harts to catch up on all debts and invest in desperately needed equipment. Alexander brought in a consultant who helped Richard restructure operations, and within a month, the vineyard had its first major distribution deal with a Boston restaurant group. Eleanor found herself splitting time between Boston and the Berkshires, between her non-profit work and helping her family rebuild. Alexander made the drive every weekend, and slowly, inevitably, they rebuilt what they'd lost. Only stronger this time, built on honesty instead of teenage idealism. But it wasn't all smooth. There were arguments about business decisions, tension over how much time they could realistically spend together, moments when old fears resurfaced and Eleanor had to fight the urge to push him away again. The breaking point came 3 months after the masquerade. Eleanor was at the vineyard for Thanksgiving when Victoria Pennington showed up unannounced, claiming Alexander had invited her to discuss a potential investment. "He's not here," Eleanor said coldly. "Oh, I know. I came to see you." Victoria's smile was sharp. "I wanted to offer some advice, woman to woman. Alexander may be infatuated with you now, but men like him don't stay with women like you. Eventually, he'll want someone who fits his world, someone who doesn't embarrass him at society functions." Eleanor felt the old shame rise up, the voice that said Victoria was right, that she didn't belong in Alexander's world. But then she thought about the paintings in his mother's studio, about the way Alexander traced her scars like they were precious, about 4 months of consistent, patient love. "Here's the thing, Victoria," Eleanor said, her voice steady. "I don't care about fitting into his world. We're building our own world, and it doesn't have room for people who measure worth by bank accounts and bloodlines." How provincial. Victoria's eyes flashed. "You think love conquers all? Please. In 6 months, he'll realize what everyone else already knows, that you're damaged goods trying to play in a league where you don't belong." "Get off my property," Eleanor said quietly. "Now." After Victoria left, Eleanor called Alexander, shaking with anger and residual fear. "Did you invite Victoria Pennington to discuss an investment?" "What? No. Why would I? Eleanor, what happened?" She told him, her voice breaking as she relayed Victoria's words. Alexander's response was immediate and fierce. "I'm coming there right now. You don't have to. I'm coming. We're dealing with this together." He arrived 2 hours later, and Eleanor fell into his arms, finally letting herself break down. Alexander held her while she cried, whispering reassurances, promising over and over that Victoria's poison had no power. "She's right, though," Eleanor said when she could speak again. "Your world, Alexander, I'll never fully fit there. There will always be people who see my scars, who judge me, who think I'm not good enough for you." "Then fuck my world," Alexander said with startling vehemence. "Fuck society and expectations and what people think. Eleanor, listen to me. I don't want you to fit into my world. I want to build a new world with you, one where we get to decide what matters. What about your family business, your responsibilities?" "I'm restructuring, hiring people to handle the day-to-day operations." Taking a step back from the society circus, Alexander cupped her face. "You know what I learned from losing my mother? Life is too short to waste on things that don't matter. And you matter, Eleanor. You're the only thing that's mattered in years." "I love you," Eleanor whispered. "I never stopped loving you. I love you too, always have, always will." They spent that Thanksgiving at the Hart farmhouse, surrounded by family and friends from town, eating too much and laughing until their sides hurt. It was nothing like the formal Ashford Thanksgiving Eleanor remembered from childhood, but it was real and warm, and theirs. On Christmas Eve, Alexander took Eleanor back to his mother's studio. He'd been spending time there, Eleanor knew, working through grief, reconnecting with memories. But tonight, the space was different. Candles lit everywhere, a bottle of wine open and breathing. "There's one more painting I need to show you," Alexander said. He unveiled a canvas. His own work, Eleanor realized with shock. It was rough, unpracticed, but unmistakably her. Eleanor as she was now, scars visible and prominent, but rendered with such love and care that they became part of her beauty rather than a defect. "I'm not an artist like my mother was," Alexander said, "but I wanted to try. Wanted to capture what I see when I look at you, not despite your scars, but including them, because they're part of your story, and your story is beautiful." Eleanor couldn't speak, could only stare at this tangible proof of how he saw her. "I have a question for you," Alexander continued, and he was nervous now, his hands shaking slightly as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "We've lost enough time, Eleanor. I don't want to waste another day pretending we're taking this slow, or being careful, or any of that bullshit. I know what I want. I want you. I want a life together. I want to wake up next to you for the next 50 years and see what kind of world we can build." He opened the box, revealing a ring, a single sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, antique and beautiful. "This was my mother's," he said. "She left it for me to give to the woman I'd love for the rest of my life. Eleanor Margaret Hart, will you marry me?" Eleanor's vision blurred with tears, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Yes, God, yes." The ring slid onto her finger like it had always belonged there. Alexander pulled her close and kissed her deeply, and Eleanor tasted salt from their combined tears, tasted the promise of their future. They were married on a June day at the Hart Vineyard, surrounded by blooming roses and the people who mattered. No society photographers, no obligation invitations, just family and friends who'd supported them through the hard times. Eleanor wore a simple dress and no veil, her scars visible and unremarkable in the golden afternoon light. Alexander wore his grandfather's suit and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. "I was so lost," Eleanor said in her vows, her voice steady and sure. "So convinced that I had to hide, that I had to protect you from my damage. But you taught me that love isn't about protection. It's about partnership, about facing life's disasters together, about building something real out of broken pieces. You taught me that scars are just proof we survived, and I want to spend the rest of my life surviving with you, building with you, loving with you." Alexander's vows were simpler. "You're my home, Eleanor. You always have been, and I promise to never let you forget it." The vineyard partnership flourished. Within 2 years, Hart Ashford Wines had become one of the premier boutique wineries in New England. Eleanor continued her non-profit work, now focusing on helping trauma survivors build new careers in agriculture and hospitality. Alexander restructured the Ashford business portfolio, divesting from industries he didn't believe in, investing in sustainable and socially responsible ventures. They split their time between a renovated farmhouse on the Hart property and an apartment in Boston, building a life that honored both their histories while creating something entirely new. On weekends, they'd work the vineyard together, dirt under their fingernails, sun on their faces, building the legacy they'd almost lost. 3 years after the masquerade, Eleanor stood in the vineyard at sunset, her hand on her swollen belly, watching Alexander show their nephew how to check the vines. She thought about masks and second chances, about the courage it takes to be vulnerable, about the grace of being loved for exactly who you are. Her phone buzzed. Grace, texting a photo from New York. She'd just gotten engaged to a public defender she'd met at a community event. Looks like the Hart sisters are good at second chances, the text read. Eleanor smiled, texting back, "We're good at fighting for what matters." Alexander looked up, caught her expression and jogged over. "What's the smile for?" "Everything," Eleanor said honestly. "For Grace getting engaged, for our baby, for this vineyard, for you, for us, for the fact that we're standing here at all." He pulled her close, his hand covering hers on her stomach. "Best decision I ever made was recognizing you at that masquerade. Best decision I ever made was removing my mask." They stood there as the sun set over the vineyard, over the vines that represented 4 generations of dreams, over the land they'd saved together. Eleanor's scars caught the fading light, no longer something to hide but simply part of who she was. A woman who'd survived, who'd loved, who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be seen. Behind them, the farmhouse glowed with warm light. Inside, their family was gathering for dinner. Eleanor's parents, Grace and her new fiancé, Alexander's father, friends who'd become family. All the people who'd supported them, who'd believed in their love, even when they couldn't believe in it themselves. "Ready?" Alexander asked, gesturing toward the house. Eleanor took his hand, feeling the weight of her wedding ring, the flutter of their baby, the absolute rightness of this moment. "Ready," she said, and together they walked toward home.